Hey folks, welcome. Happy to have you join us today. We're going to be talking about budgeting and KPIs as we are working through this series on the Green Dot operating system.
That's right.
I'm Ben Gandy. I've got my partner Ken Thomas with me.
Hey Ben, good to be here.
Yeah, good. Budgeting and KPIs. Before we jump into that, we want to talk just a little bit about what is the Green Dot operating system.
That'd be good.
Right. So the Green Dot operating system, it's a compilation of the best practices that we've seen as we've had the opportunity to sort of look inside and under the hood of companies over decades, over the entire country, right? We've really tried to, in this system, codify what we believe are the elements to organizational development and success,
Yes.
right? So if you look at this graphic across the top row is really the executive level building blocks of what we believe contribute to organizational success. It has to do with the mission and values of an organization, the vision, ultimately the destination of the organization, the strategy, how people intend to get there,
right?
The structure, the folks that you got to have to fulfill the execute on the strategy, to fulfill the vision,
Yep.
the budget. There's a business process across the middle of this graphic where we've come to understand that all the sales inside any organization really start off with a lead, there's scope development, there's an estimating phase, then there's sold as estimates become work, and then we go into work in progress, and then job closeout or renewal.
Yeah, and Ben, in that business process is one of the areas we see so many companies, especially small companies, get stuck because there's too many hands in the bucket, I guess, or in the pie, and you got to learn to separate that and document that process.
That's right. Failure to really define each phase there in terms of the sales, the operations, the administrative piece of it, just creates chaos and confusion, and it gets you. It's just out. You can't grow past a certain point until you really understand that piece of the business. And then across the bottom is the inputs. On one side, there's the client relationship and the sales inputs to the business process, and then the other side is really the planning, the logistics, the execution, the leadership, the field leadership that it takes to actually execute on the work that we have. And then finally, you got to measure it, right? And you got to understand the metrics and the accountabilities that are associated with that.
It's complicated to build a successful, mature organization, and it helps to be able to see the components.
Yes.
Why do you think it's so important to have a documented system?
You know, it's a good question. I believe that having this documented system has given us an anchor point to assess and evaluate organizations. It's as we see gaps in organizational development through this template, we're able to teach and train and coach by referencing the template, right? What is the content that's associated with each one of those building blocks? It's really using this system has really sort of given us the leverage to help businesses get past being stuck. Because so many businesses that we get called into are stuck. It may be at 2 million, it may be at 20 million, but in terms of growth or quality of life or profitability, they're stuck. And it relates back to the essential elements that are represented in these building blocks of the Green Dot operating system.
Right. Awesome. It does add structure. It gives a vocabulary around what we need to do and how we need to do it. It also gives us the ability to share our Green Dot partners with each other, and there's a common process discussion going on. So it's easy to benchmark against other companies doing the same things.
That's right.
So we're going to talk about budgeting and what we'd say funding your dream. When you and I got in the business years ago, I don't think we were really thinking about numbers. We were hoping to get a paycheck.
Right.
But we really enjoyed the horticultural side of landscaping. We loved the smell of fresh cut grass and the reward of a great project that we could leave behind. But as time grew and we became more interested in the business of landscaping, we started to really inquire about what makes the economics of landscaping work. And I remember specifically years ago going to an industry conference, and I owned a small business in Atlanta at the time, and felt like we were pretty good landscape technicians. We knew how to do the work. We knew how to get the work done with high quality. But I sat down at a breakfast of champions with some other business owners, and that morning they were talking about operating budgets and return on investment and gross margin and cash flow. And I realized that morning that I needed to increase my business acumen. If I was ever going to achieve my life and career goals in the landscape industry, I was going to have to spend more time becoming a landscape business person and a little less time being a great landscape technician. I had already mastered those skills, but it was time to move on to the economic side of landscaping.
It's a big moment in anybody's career,
Yes.
right, in this industry, to certainly understand that there's a point when you've got to get it in terms of the finances, because the budget, when I first was exposed to this side of the business, it's just a page full of numbers, right?
Right.
But a budget is not just a page full of numbers. It is in some respects, but it's a financial roadmap. It really represents the plan, the strategic plan of how we intend to run the enterprise.
Right.
When you develop a budget, and you do so responsibly, you do it well, then it informs the sales plan. I have to understand, okay, what's it going to take to fund the dream, to fund this this enterprise, and I can create my sales plan accordingly. It informs the operational plan. I need to understand what are the overhead expenses that I have to overcome to recover. Therefore, what kind of margins do I need to estimate and produce to have enough money to do that? I need to understand cash flow requirements. We've put together budgets that at times of the year may have negative cash flows. We're literally going to run out of money. I need to see those well in advance so that I can properly plan financially for those times. And I need to understand the capital that's required. Our industry is not hugely capital intensive, but you do have to buy trucks, and you got to buy mowers, and you got to buy skid steers. And I need to understand in advance of purchasing those how I'm going to pay for them, right?
Right.
So the budgeting and understanding that side of the business informs all those pieces of the business, and all of a sudden it's not just about cutting grass, right, or planting trees. All of a sudden it's about all those other things.
That's right. Yeah. Any successful organization figures out how to handle an effective budgeting process. We can't wing it every day. We gotta have the numbers and the roadmap to be able to get there.
That's right.
Some ideas around budget. I remember the very first budget that I ever actually implemented at Landscape Techniques years ago, and it was on a whiteboard. I don't even think we had Excel spreadsheets yet, but it was a basic conversation with a team that said, how much business do we think we can do next year based on the business that we did this year and based on our backlog? And we looked at our expense history for some of our key accounts, and we talked about what we needed in the next year to be able to achieve our financial profit goals. And it was a great experience. It's intimidating at first when you first begin to work through a budgeting process. One of the things that we believe is that the budget should be developed in a group setting with our key leadership in tow. We've had too many examples where budgets were created in the accountant's office or in the back office by one or two people, and then kind of thrown out on the table and said, this is what we're going to do this year. And there's just no power in that to the organization.
That's right. Yeah. When it's done behind closed doors, then it's the accountant's budget. It's not. It's the whole team's budget, and the whole team needs to participate in putting those numbers together so they understand it, so they can be accountable to it.
That's right. And when we think about the budgeting process, we typically would look at the fourth quarter of a year to think about next year's operating budget. And typically we would also be looking at, and reviewing our strategic plan prior to the budgeting process, where we would also outline our operational plan for the next fiscal year. All of those decisions inform the budgeting process. And then we would find a way to pull the pre-work together, all of the history of this year's financial performance, and deliver that and distribute it to the potential players in the budgeting process. A lot of times we'd go away. We'd make it a 3-day budget process, maybe somewhere off site, so that we can get together and and enjoy some camaraderie, but also really work hard at figuring out the numbers. And another key point in our budgeting process is we really believe in a zero-based budgeting process. And what that means really is we start as if we don't have the specific facts we need to drive the business forward. In our expense categories, we may know that the rent is going to be the same next year, or the utilities are, a small percentage of the budget that don't have a lot of variance. But in the other expense accounts, they're pretty complicated. And we want to make sure that we understand how many new pieces of equipment do we need and how do they relate to the expense budget. What are we going to do from a marketing perspective? Not just 10% more than what we spent this year so we can grow by 10%, but what are the line items in that marketing budget with the dollar amounts associated with them so we know exactly what we're spending in each line item. And then we can measure the return on investment on those particular line items.
That's right, Ken. And I feel like when you approach budgeting in that way, it's tedious and you really got to get into a lot of detail, but the product has a lot of integrity so that as we're talking about performance and we're measuring our financial performance through the year against that, well, we've got a document that makes sense, that has some validity to it, so that it's fair to hold one another accountable to that.
That's right.
If you just kind of wing it, then people will dismiss it. I would, right? Sure. If it has no integrity to it, and it's somebody made it up and they just added 10% to every expense line from the prior year. That now there's going to be really no accountability or buy-in.
Right. To that. And everybody wonders what's in that line item that I'm being held accountable to.
That's right. So that's right. I think when you put together the budget in a thoroughgoing way, it's a team effort, and you have good integrity in your process, that it gives you the opportunity to practice open book management, where you can share the financial results through the year with the team. Every month you close the month, and then I can compare the actual performance against the budgeted performance. Some people call it a financial statement, some people call it a profit and loss statement, whatever you want to call it. That scorecard is mission critical to developing financial literacy and putting everybody in the organization on the same page in terms of what the scorecard is. It creates ownership within the team so that everybody's got a number within the structure anyway. It relates back to the budget, which hopefully they participated in creating. It allows us to be properly reactive or proactive to what's really going on in the business. And we can collaborate if we have a good budgeting process and we're looking at the numbers kind of in the right way. Otherwise, you just sort of wing it and you work real hard through the year and you may work your ass off but not achieve your goals.
Right.
What a waste, right?
Yeah, and we believe that there's power in the numbers. And just like we had an aha moment to build our financial acumen, from that industry event, it's our job as leaders in our organization to help our teams to build their financial acumen so that they can become the next leader in the organization, the next profit center manager, potentially. And I'd much rather like to have a team full of business leaders than just a bunch of landscape technicians.
That's right. That's right. That's more fun. That's a bigger game. Right.
One of the things about the budget is it forms all of the key performance indicators within the organization. There's not 100 things to measure in the landscape business to be successful, but there are some key things to measure, some key performance indicators, and they relate either to sales or to production or to financial or to administrative. And it's clear coming out of the budgeting process what those KPIs should be and how do we monitor them and display them and hold each person and each team member accountable to those key performance indicators. We believe there's really two types of KPIs. There's what we call leading indicators or looking forward, and lagging indicators. So two different types. Leading indicators are kind of like looking through the windshield of your car and assessing the road ahead of you and making sure that you're heading down the right path and that there aren't any obstacles in your way. And the lagging indicators could be a little bit like looking in your rear view mirror at where we've come from, and next time maybe we'll go a different route. But there's leading, there's lagging indicators, and all of our indicators have to be compared against a budget. You know, it's one thing to know what our gross profit is on a job or how many labor hours we have on a job in actuality, but what was the budget? What was the reference point, and did we win or did we lose?
Without that, then we've got one score.
Right, that's right.
Alabama scored 40. What does that mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything unless we know the other score.
That's right. That's right. So key performance indicators are critical to the success of the organization. We want to be looking forward at our key performance, our leading indicators. Hopefully we can change what's going to happen in our lagging if we can see in advance what we need to do, as we're looking out across the horizon. Certainly when we look back at history, there's not much we can do about it. The numbers are the numbers, but how do we take that experience and use that to be more effective in the future?
Mm-hmm.
You know, a few sales KPIs, we want to focus in on the sales side of things. Obviously, what's your sales goal?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're a business developer, is your sales goal $1 million a year? If so, what's your close rate? What's the average job size that you have? These are all indicators that will help a business developer to manage their flow and manage their success. We need to understand in our proposals and our activities, are we on track to hit, other key metrics such as proposals on the street, close rates, and ultimate sales. Another piece of the sales model is really the relational side of client relationship management. What's our retention rate? What are we doing to build loyalty so that we retain at least 90% or better of our customer base? Mm-hmm. It's much easier to retain a customer than it is to go find a new customer. Another KPI in the enhancements, in the account management side of the business is enhancements, or what we call upsales. For every dollar of base maintenance, how much upsells or vertical sales can we count on? What's the predictable penetration on those enhancements? Is it 35 cents for every dollar? Is it 50 cents for every dollar? And we have top client relationship managers that are selling dollar per dollar additional enhancements to their client base. All great KPIs that are important in the sales side of things.
Yep. And all of them sort of driven off the budget.
That's right. That's right. And we monitor those and we hold each other accountable to those KPIs. There's plenty of production KPIs as well. Some of the leading indicators are labor hours and headcount. As we look out across the year, and Ben, you and I have done it on multiple occasions, sit down and figure out how many hours it's going to take from January, February, March, all the way through the year, based on the workload that we have sold, and that translates back into a head count that should be predictable based on our sales curve and our existing backlog. Having that leading indicator helps us to make smart decisions on how many people we need, if we're going to work overtime or not work overtime, when we're going to need to scale down the off season or ramp up on the growing season. But if you don't see that in advance, you're stuck with too many people or not enough people. And it just doesn't work. Obviously, gross margin is a key metric. We've talked about that before. Gross margin tells us, did we win or lose on job cost on a particular account or particular job? Again, gross margin is the amount of dollars that remains from a sale after we paid our direct cost expenses of labor, materials, subcontract, and potentially some equipment. It's a huge metric, and there's some benchmarking across the country that we share with our customers and that we focus on. Some of the lagging key performance indicators are the income statement that we talked about before. Obviously, job cost on the jobs that we're completing, labor analysis, labor efficiency. If you divide your budgeted hours by your actual hours on a particular job, you get your labor efficiency quotient. If you hit your hours, it's 100% efficient. If you beat your hours, it may go up to 110, 120, 130% efficient. If you miss your hours, it's just like in school. It gets bad, 80, 70, 60, failing. So you got to know, how did we do and what do we need to do differently in the future? And you got to measure that real time, every day. And there's some great software out there today that gives us the ability to measure labor and gross profit and sales, real time every day. One of the software programs we use is Aspire. It's very efficient. It's one of the best programs out there in the industry today. As long as we feed the right data in, we have the data at our fingertips to review our KPIs.
You know, we also, in terms of the production KPIs, have got to measure safety. It's a moral responsibility
Right.
we have in our industry. And while it's challenging, we have to measure quality.
Yeah, I guess quality is nuanced.
It
A certain
is.
amount. Not everybody's paying for Disney World
Right.
quality, but we should have a standard minimum quality metric that we want to make sure we stay within.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. And, you know, so we've got the sales metrics, we've got productivity metrics, production metrics. They're kind of brought together in our financial metrics, in the profit and loss statement, where we can look at that by month to month, and also year to date. It's typically the way that that we look at it. And we look at the sales, the revenues across the top of that statement. We look at the margins. We look at the contribution margins, the net operating profits. Those are the big indicators that that we're assessing whenever we're tying all that together. At the same time, you know, as we do that kind of on a monthly basis, doing some sort of job cost analysis, at least on our larger jobs, where we understand, you know, here's what we estimated, here's what we planned, how do we actually perform on that work is important. Looking at labor efficiency, as you said, the over and under, it's the single biggest cost in our business, so you better look at it, right?
That's right.
If it drives the wrong way, it sinks you pretty quick. Overtime utilization in our business, you're wise to budget for a certain overtime utilization, but it can quickly get out of hand, frankly, in terms of the expense category. So you got to look at that, and understanding overhead utilization and how well we're leveraging the overheads that we have in place is another piece of the story that the financial metrics will tell us. Right?
That's a great point, Ben. You know, when we go in and work with new clients and assess their organizational maturity, one of the first places we start is with the numbers, because we've been looking at numbers for many, many years, and the numbers, to your point, tell a story. Tell a story about the maturity of the organization, the effectiveness of the operations team, our ability to meet sales goals and sales margins. We find out so much by digging into the numbers, and we meet with a lot of companies, especially small companies, that aren't looking at a financial statement once a month. Maybe they're looking at it every quarter. It's the key to bringing your organization to the next level, starting with a budget and managing to that budget every month. Whatever you got to do to close that statement every month, you got to do it. And you need to review, you know, by the 15th or the third week of the month, and look back and see how we did against the budget.
That's right. And we provided a sample P&L for this webinar, where it's a format that you and I have used for a long time that we kind of like, where the accounts are listed down the middle of the page, and there's the month results on one side of the page and the year-to-date results on the other side of the page, where they're represented with the budget versus actual, month and year-to-date,
Right.
the variance between those two, and critically, we also see the percentages, right?
Yes.
And the percentages is where the story is really told. We've seen organizations that may oversell their goal by $1 million, but it's not showing up in the net profit. Well, what happened to it? Well, I got to go back through the percentages and understand it's either the overheads or the more likely the gross margins were amiss, and it's a lot of work to produce $1 million that I didn't budget for. It's a great opportunity, but I want to put it in my pocket, not have it disappear. So. This particular format is fairly standard throughout the industry, and quickly tells the story, right?
Yeah, and the good thing, and the accounts that you mentioned down the middle, is what we call the chart of accounts, obviously, in an accounting system. And if we can standardize that chart of accounts, which we have, and share it across the industry, and we had a great expert who's still around, Frank Ross, who developed some of these first standardized financial statements that we're still using today, allows us to benchmark our companies off of other companies, your company off of other companies across the industry. And it may be across northern companies or southern companies or snow belt or whatever it may be, but once you have the trend and once you understand the story behind the numbers, it's great to compare and contrast and learn from your peers.
Right.
But if everybody has a different statement, it's pretty hard to do.
It's really hard to do. The typical structure of the budget and the statement that we put together that you're going to see, anybody that's attending this webinar today is going to see throughout the industry out there, list the revenues at the top, and they may be construction, they may be maintenance, they may be snow, they may be categories that go into that. The direct expenses typically fall directly underneath the revenue, the labor, the materials, there may be some equipment rental, things like that. And the difference between those two is the gross profit, what's left over, right? Represented as a percentage of gross margin. Subcontract, we've always really been proponents of separating out subcontract from self-performed revenues because the margins are so different that when you put them together, it clouds the margin of both, and you don't get as accurate or clear a read of the story as you'd like. So we promote separating that out. Indirect expenses are what the expenses that are put underneath that, which relate to everything it takes to do to produce the work, but cannot be tracked directly to a job. Like fuel or management salaries or things like that. You have to have those expenses. You just can't practically track them to a job. The money that's left over after those expenses are paid, we've always called the contribution margin. Right. And the contribution margin is what remains to fund the fixed expenses in the business, the rents, the insurance, the owner salaries, the things like that.
And make a profit.
And make profit.
Right.
That's right. And it doesn't have to be that complicated, right? If you make a gross margin of 50% and your indirects are 20%,
right,
then hopefully all you have to do is keep your fixed costs under, 20% would do it.
That's right.
And you have 10% left over. Right.
Yeah, that's what's so important about the contribution margin. Obviously, gross margin takes into account the direct expenses. Contribution margin takes into account the indirects as well. We know the trends and the benchmarks across the industry. If you're not coming up with somewhere between a 26 to a 30% contribution margin, you're not going to be able to cover your overheads and make any money.
Yep.
Our fixed costs typically are running somewhere between 15 and 20%. So you got to be able to have 25 to 30% of contribution margin before you get down to the
That's
bottom
right.
line.
In a construction-heavy business, those ratios may vary a little bit, but it's not that mysterious.
That's right.
What it takes, and as part of being diligent about the budgeting process, is to put that together so you can hold yourself accountable to making some money.
One of the other key points, Ben, and we've talked about it before, is we believe in consistency on reporting. So the format that we budget in is the same format that we estimate in, and the same format that we review job cost in, and the same format that we look at a P&L on a regular basis. So standardization gets your mind, fixated on what you can see quickly through the numbers by making sure that we're not switching up the game between the budget, the P&L, and the job cost.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great point. The budget is mission critical to developing a budget so that you can hold yourself accountable and properly develop the other KPIs, the other key performance indicators in the business. We've gone so far as to assemble dashboards where we can represent the key performance indicators, the key pieces of the budget and the P&L, all in sort of one view, right? Even graphically, so it makes it very quick to understand, ahead, behind kind of thing.
Yeah.
This is, it's a long ways from, green grass and pretty flowers, right? But,
sure is.
But this is the departure, and this is the mission critical part of organizational development is really understanding this side of the business, right?
It really is, and I remember back in the days of Scapes in Atlanta, Steve Crummaker, our controller, had created these scorecards, and each team had a scorecard that was posted on the wall. You know, so there was accountability and competition, healthy competition, that really led to a lot of pride and a lot of accomplishment because we knew exactly what we needed to measure, and it was displayed real time so that we could make decisions and change course if we needed to.
And it wasn't, you know, performance wasn't a matter of opinion.
That's right.
It was a matter of objective reality.
But I'm
right?
working hard.
That's right. What are the results? Let's measure them numerically, right? And then we can make decisions appropriately.
That's right. Yep. So that's budgeting and key financial metrics, KPIs. We challenge everyone, you know, that's watching today to improve and invest in your financial acumen. We're here to help if we can, and obviously the landscape associations, your local association and the national association are great resources as well.
Absolutely. We just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Pleasure to have you with us. Be sure and follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook. You can look us up on the web, obviously, envisorco.com.
Yeah, I want to also give a shout out to Envisor Academy. It's our online educational platform. I think it'd be great for business owners, leaders, and managers to get in and be able to learn at your own pace. We've got some account management, masters, business development education, as well as our Start Clean, Finish Clean, and organizational development curriculum. So look forward to seeing you on that platform as well.
Thanks so much, folks.
Thank you.